Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Individual errors nearly cost us the game, leaving us forced to rely on Lacazette and Aubameyang to bail us out. Now you tell me which game that's from in the last 12 months. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner, and we didn't lose the derby, but we didn't win the derby, and it's real frustrating because once again, it's just stupid mistakes costing us in a game we could have won. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a more analytical way than I have already begun the podcast. But housekeeping, yeah, we're gonna do that first over on Patreon. So I didn't get to watch the game live, which meant I missed the chat on Twitter and I missed the chat on Discord, and that's kind of like my pub, my local, where I get to share my thoughts with all of you wonderful people. And so because I didn't do that, I just recorded me watching the whole game. So over on Patreon right now, if you want to rewatch the NLD and experience it through the mania, the hysteria that is my reaction, I actually thought it was quite measured, and I think you will take away good things from it. But you will also laugh at me as I lose my mind. So you can do that over on Patreon. You can join the Discord chat where Giant Gooner has posted his phenomenal stats review of the game. Always a great feature that I look forward to every week. And then last but not least, and I know some of you are sick to death of hearing about it, and if you are, I totally understand, but The Athletic gave me a chance to write for them. I am forever grateful. They did give us a chance to speak to Amy Lawrence on the pod. We're going to be speaking to other, shall I say, prestigious guests down the road. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that if you do sign up for theathletic.com/Arsenal Vision, you help the pod, you help our relationship, bringing great guests on here. Of course, you help them too. But we do appreciate it. And I apologize if hearing about it, because they've really, I know, done a media blitz, and so you're hearing about them a lot. But if you do want to support their
Michael
great journalism.
Cox has just done a great tactics blog on it that everybody should read.
And there's a great article about Guendouzi on there, and Amy Lawrence wrote a brilliant piece about Torreira. So there's at least, there's good stuff there from good writers, if you forget about me for a second. So theathletic.com/Arsenal Vision. You help us, you help them, and we get great guests on here like Amy. So moving on, Paul, you already heard him, so I might as well introduce him. He's on Twitter at Paz in My Pants. Hello, Paz.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
And Tim is back. The return of the Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stoberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
All right, Tim, let's start with you. I am a big believer that in the derby, what you really need is leadership, intelligence, and experience. So why did he start Granit Xhaka?
Well, he started Granit Xhaka because he kind of always starts Granit Xhaka, and I think listening to the preview pod, I think actually did one of you waver and say he was going to drop him?
I did. Yep. I wish casted that, and in retrospect, I do not feel bad about it.
But I mean, pretty much everyone thought he was going to start, right? With putting aside whether you kind of agree with it or not. That's all the available evidence tells you that he starts Granit Xhaka, and I think what's kind of interesting is I still maintain this theory that that's not going to be the case for much longer. And given what transpired, maybe things will move on a little bit more quickly. But I still think he's got Guendouzi earmarked for that position. But maybe he wants to settle a few other things down. A lot of other new players have come into the spine of the team. Ceballos, Luiz, Pepe. These are big changes, and I think he's the Granit one's on the tab. And I know a lot of people, understandably, I've had some kickback on that theory, and a lot of people kind of don't agree with it and said, but he always starts him. But he always started Iwobi and Mkhitaryan for a while, and look where they are right now. So I think Emery can be a very keep your friends close and your enemies closer type of manager, really. And yeah, given the respective performances of Guendouzi and Xhaka, maybe my theory will come to light a little bit quicker than I thought. I'm still not sure. But yeah, it's a shame really, because Xhaka, he has actually started the season quite well. I thought he was good against against Newcastle. I thought he was good against Liverpool. I thought he was the absolute least of our problems that day, to be quite honest with you. And I've been trying to watch him this season without the confirmation bias swirling in my head, because basically there's the emotional reason to drop Xhaka, which is that he keeps fucking doing this and he keeps costing us, and he cost us against Brighton, and he cost us against Tottenham, and all of the emotional torpor that builds up. But there's the good And that, by the way, is not incorrect. When I say that's an emotional argument, I'm not saying it's therefore invalid. It's very valid. But there's also like the logical tactical argument, which is that, maybe he just does things a little bit too slowly and he's not really suited to the Premier League and things like that. So, it's more grist to the mill, with Xhaka. You feel like the worms really turned with the fan base. He used to be a divisive player. He's not a divisive player now. There's like a consensus has formed. And once that happens, it's very difficult to turn that round, because that's when, the confirmation bias does kick in. And, I was watching him in the Newcastle and the Spurs games closely. And I think I was watching him closely because I don't really want him there anymore. And I was trying to fight that urge. And then he just goes into that tackle and you just think, oh, Granit, man, you don't make things easy for yourself. And he's in this weird paradox, isn't he, where he's kind of the captain, but there's something stopping Emery from confirming him as the captain. And on one hand, you do think he's kind of like a leader, but then he does these like batshit mental things, and it's so random as well. That's the weird thing. Like, you can't see it coming. It's just like a switch flicks at random moments. He's like a landmine. It's very, very difficult to figure out why it happens to him. But I think you've just got to assume at this stage that stuff is just completely baked into his DNA, and you can't get rid of it. I don't think at this stage. And for all the talk of him being a leader, he blows up too much to be a leader, for my money. And I don't think we have to worry about like gradually phasing him out the team, because when has this team ever been settled under Unai Emery? Is it ever going to be? I don't think so. I don't get the impression that he's going to settle on anything, that we're going to keep going through this like chameleon thing. So I don't really see I don't consider it a disruption, because like the team lives in a constant state of tactical kind of change and disruption, if you will. So I just don't see the point in delaying it any longer. And that's not to say I think, he should be Mustafa'd and just completely banished. We play a lot of games and we'll need him, but his place as an absolutely automatic pick just has to be, not even under question. Like, there shouldn't be a question about it anymore.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I think the Arsenal diaspora has a very weird tendency to feel that they must identify that a player has positive qualities to offset the identification of their negative qualities. Every single player who plays professional football has positive qualities. I mean, not Mustafi, but obviously all the other ones. I'm kidding. And so identifying that, hey, he can pass. He plays a lot of passes, and he can kind of long pass. Like, of course he can, or he would not exist in the footballing universe. But like, to me, one of the principal reasons you give a guy a captaincy and you play him at the base of your midfield every week is that guy, more than any guy in the team maybe, should be the dependable rock around which everything pivots. And I think if Xhaka has shown anything for any of his positive qualities, is that he is not a dependable rock. Well, he's kind of a rock, but not dependable. And so once again, he blows up, and I don't think it was the only mistake he made in the game. There was a pass on to Pepe on the counterattack where he had the entire half of a pitch to play him into. It's the thing Xhaka should be good at. He's given the ball quite nicely by Torreira. He's in acres of space, sitting in that rocking chair that Clive always likes to talk about. All he's got to do is just ping it into the opposition half, and Pepe runs onto it, and he's totally free and uncovered, and he plays it right to the feet of a Spurs player limply. He had the two terrible fouls he gives away on the edge of our box. He was giving away fouls there instead of shuffling his feet like he always does. Look, I don't want to make this entire analysis about Xhaka, but I do think that in modern football, you are only as strong as the player that is most vulnerable to you. And when I did the Liverpool podcast, I was a guest on a Liverpool podcast. It was interesting to me how much they were saying they thought they could target him if he starts. I think he is a target, and I think opposing teams know that, and I just worry that, we look at it. This is a team that doesn't win games it should win because of players that make mistakes that professionals shouldn't make. And whether that was Mustafi, who's now out of the team, or Luiz last weekend, or Sokratis and Xhaka this week, that's what's holding us back. Clive, I'll come to you. I don't necessarily need you to defend Xhaka because I don't think there's much point in doing it, but I will ask you what you thought of the setup, because I think It was sort of a flat three. I think obviously Guendouzi thrived in it. I think Torreira struggled in it a little bit. And I'm sort of curious why Emery feels a little reluctant to use Torreira where it seems like he'd be a natural, which is at the base of that midfield. So in general, just looking at the structure, I think people identified pretty quickly that it lacked connectors. Everyone was thrilled, of course, to see the front three, the PAL, the Pepe, Aubameyang, Lacazette front three. But it lacked connectors, and that sort of played out that way in the first half. So how do you feel about the tactical setup that Emery went with for this match versus maybe what we've done against them in the past?
Yeah, I didn't think midfield worked at all. And Guendouzi ended the game strong, but he was pretty average in the first half, if we're honest. Torreira and Guendouzi, I thought they were both taking up a lot of wide positions. I don't understand why, because they were just a two spread out as a three, so they weren't connected as a three. So at least when you're connected, you can get some combinations going. But they were being pulled all over the place and left so much space for Son to run into. So I didn't like that. You're now putting Torreira into big spaces, and then when he's got big spaces playing enough, he runs right the way into the box and takes him away from areas where he's really good, when he can see the game in front of him and go and sneak up on people. So he played a completely different game. I think we managed to Kante Torreira in this game. We've done exactly the same.
I'm so glad you said that, by the way. That was the first thing that came to mind. That's a brilliant observation. Not because I had it, but just because you made it.
Yeah, we Kante Torreira. We've now taken a player that's a sprinter killer in front of the back four into playing him almost on the right wing and getting to the box and see what you can do. So we're killing him, and people are now questioning his talent, where he needs to be positioned differently. Guendouzi, eventually, once Ceballos came on, I thought Guendouzi absolutely took over the game completely and just rose and rose and rose. He did some good defensive actions throughout the game. He's a hard-working player. You know my thoughts on him. I think he'll be our best player very, very quickly, and that could be happening sooner than even I thought. So yeah, he's on the way up. And Xhaka, basically, what he's doing, he's just trying to lead too much, and he's sort of one of these players that when they're stressed, he feels he has to go and put out the fire. And the way he puts out the fire is by moving himself stupidly into situations where his skill sets or lack of skill sets are exposed. And so he's not being smart. And the reason why he's in most of our teams, when we try to pick the team or Emery's team, is because we think you are the older one, you are the one that should be leading the younger ones. But it's the younger ones that are leading you with their actions, and you are making people leave the ground with a memory of your big mistake that's cost us 10 pints in the pub, right? That's literally what happened, and so that needs to change. So I thought the midfield three did not work for me, and I think on the end of this game, I think we learned a lot. Maybe more so than the Liverpool game, where we were tactically not bad but didn't execute. This game, I thought tactically we were quite poor, but we showed a lot of heart and desire to make sure we couldn't be beaten. And I like a 4-3-3 in my mind, Elliot. I like it. But we are really heading towards a stick-on 4-2-3-1, morph into a 4-3-3 with an active 10 dropping in to make three in midfield on occasion for build-up, and also connecting to the front three. We need that. So it's about finding the balance, because we are losing bits of Guendouzi, we're losing bits of Xhaka on a single pivot on his own, and we're definitely losing Torreira, and we can't afford to do that. We've got Willock on the sideline, can also play in that double pivot, and we've got two number 10s that are going to want to play, right? And I'm saying Ozil and Ceballos, and we got three forwards, right? So we need to think about the shape and think about what we've learned from this game, because we didn't connect, we didn't cover space, we didn't have people doing the right jobs. You need to give them a job. And I think we had it too free, too easy, too much space, too much flow, not enough structure. And some of that could be because we were chasing the game and there was no structure to some of our play. But I think we need to develop something now where we say, this is what we are. This is the way to get the best out of our players. And it's time for us to make sure we maximise the talent that we have. Because this isn't a talent issue anymore. I thought this game was a tactical stupidity.
Yeah.
Compared to, I'm much more upset about this game than I was about the 3-1 defeat, because we were stupid, doing stupid things, playing with our heart, not our heads, running around like 5-year-olds. Sokratis spending time on the right wing trying to overload. This was rubbish.
Yeah.
It was rubbish from a tactical point of view, but from a derby point of view and our refusal not to be beaten, it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and I got to say, I mean, look, ultimately, the one bit of sympathy I have for Emery is no matter what you get right or what you get wrong, you can't win when people make dumb mistakes. There's no legislating for incredibly stupid mistakes, and we just make too many of them. I know for years we were leading or near the top in errors leading to goals, and it wouldn't surprise me if we are an early front runner there. For their first goal, it's a Sokratis error that is awful. It is compounded by a Luiz, I don't know if you call it an error, just a bizarre caught in two minds decision between which run to follow, and then a Leno error that leads to the tap-in that is another Sokratis error because he's not running back and he was too high up the pitch to come back and get the tap-in. So,
did you see Adrian Clark's breakdown? Yeah.
No, I have not. What did he say?
He said about that goal, he said, like, there are 5 mistakes in this goal, and he highlights them one after the other, which is quite incredible because it all takes about 6 seconds.
It's teamwork, Tim. It's a commitment to having no one player catch too much abuse by multiple players making multiple mistakes. But, Paul, one of the things that really struck me, and I want to get tactical here for a second because I need someone to help me understand. In the second half, what I think worked is we pressed them higher up the pitch. They can't play out. Paul, the thing that struck me in this game is that Spurs are bad at football. They are not a good footballing side. Now, I realize they're missing players, and Lo Celso coming in made a difference, and Ndombele missing is a big deal. But, like, they can't play back to front. Their defenders are not comfortable with the ball at their feet. They had almost no midfield possession whatsoever the entire game. But we played a mid-block early, and I thought that really let them off the hook. It let them play those long balls over the top and put us in trouble with long straight balls, which we struggle with because we have a bunch of idiots back there. So, are you disappointed that we didn't press higher, which has worked for us against them before? And I think the mid-block meant also that when we did have possession, the midfield wasn't connected to the front three. Later in the game when we played higher and you saw Xhaka playing in the opposition half and the midfielders, further up the pitch, the connections happened. So for you, is the big miss in the first half the extent to which we gave them territory and sat off them a little bit in their defensive third?
I think this was a game that came too early, a derby that came too early for us because we suddenly show up with PAL up front, or I like to call it lap, and we want to see them dance. Ba-boom.
I want you to know something. Once you spelled it out, LAP, you didn't have to finish the joke. I don't think there's a single person listening or on this podcast that didn't know where it was going, but I'm glad you did anyway. And it could be ALP, and we reach the peak of our attacking prowess. But anyway, continue.
Bummer. The problem with the internet is you never get to make an original joke anymore. So the nice thing was we had 3 separate areas of the field that weren't connected, and all of them underperformed. But it's really easy to see where they underperformed because none of them were connected. There was not, Xhaka's floating around between defense. He's not really connected to attack, and he's definitely not connected to defense. The problem with analyzing the game is it all goes to hell in a handbasket after about 10 minutes. We're rattled. We start chasing the game. Then they get a second goal. So shit starts coming apart. I think it's a tactical mess. I don't think any of the pieces connected. And if we were going to subtly begin to connect it as the game went along, just the mere fact that there's the derby, just the mere fact that you got 60,000 people urging people on, there was no kind of growth or adjustment in this game. It was just hell for leather. And then on the other hand, you have these it was like being in a Chucky film. Every 5 minutes, there's like this terrifying scream from nowhere, which is effectively them hitting us on the counter. I just think it was a mess. And I think it's a little dangerous to go fast and loose with conclusions. But hey, that's the business we're in. And if this had been a few games on and we'd started with the PAL and we'd had a 3-man midfield and adjusted it, then we might have seen some more finesse. Nothing really made sense here. I think the centre backs had just a terrible game from taking themselves out on that first counter where they got the first goal. I mean, both of them take themselves out of that play in just seconds. I just think it's a hot mess, and I don't know how hard you judge it, because sometimes when you're in a difficult situation, like if you've been getting driving lessons and suddenly the car is going over the cliff, you don't worry about your driving lessons and what you've been told to do and what's the correct sequence and procedure. And I think a derby tends to turn it into a hot mess, and this is what it was. But in terms of actual analysis, each area, I don't think the front three worked particularly well together. I think Lacazette had this Firmino role, or a false Firmino role, because he did bit of both. And Adrian Clark thought he did it well. Michael Cox thought he did it terribly. And I think the truth is both are true. There were times he did really good, times when the touch was way off. And without him as a creator, then I agree with Clive. I don't think Guendouzi had this incredible game everybody thought he had. I think he stepped it up in the second half when he was switched to the right, interestingly. And I think the other thing we shouldn't, whichever view you take on it, if you think he had a brilliant game,
I do.
One shouldn't forget that he had a brilliant game with Xhaka at DM. Not because Xhaka was great, but maybe that kind of a structure with that kind of a player actually gives him a platform to do his thing.
Maybe.
So again, not particularly credit to Xhaka, but on the quick point on the Xhaka thing, if we've Kante'd Torreira, we need to Henderson Xhaka. I think we talked a little bit about this.
This was on the Discord, and I hated it, but you want to expand on it?
Yeah, which is a lot of the battle among the fans is an argument around Xhaka, where people are defending him, and the other side is attacking those people who give him some defense, as you alluded to. I think the misconception is whether everybody thinks he should or shouldn't automatically be a starter. I would think the vast majority of people don't think he should be a starter, but that's the subtext to why fans get arguing with each other. I think he needs to be Henderson, and by that I mean I followed quite a few Liverpool supporters a few years ago, still do, and they felt somewhat like Henderson, like we do about Xhaka, where he was captain, where he wasn't that good. He certainly wasn't good enough, and yet he always seemed to get picked. And then suddenly he started getting dropped, and under Klopp, he plays when he's good enough and when it works. And that is exactly what needs to happen to Xhaka. And if he can get his head straight and work those errors out of his game, he probably can't.
Yeah.
And cool his heels and realize he'll play when he's good, or when the three he plays in are good, I think we'd all fucking mellow out on Xhaka entirely. And he'd have a chance to kind of late Henderson himself, where he finds a role and he becomes more mature, and he plays within his limitations and stops trying to do it all.
Maybe.
Clive's exactly spot on. His biggest failing is a strength, which is he really wants to make a difference, and he doesn't have the wherewithal to make the difference.
The problem I have with that is I feel like, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are players that don't want to make a difference and that hide on the pitch, and that's a whole different problem. But like, if you're starting for a big club, you should want to make a difference, but you should do it the right way. Like, I don't think wanting to contribute.
Not everybody has a big personality.
No, that's fair,
and
I
he
get
certainly
that.
does. And the great thing was we saw Guendouzi at the age of 20 displaying that personality with intelligence.
Yeah, and my only complaint with the Henderson comparison is, it's not that I take your point about finding a role. I just think the problem with Xhaka is not that he's without technical merit, but I think in modern midfields, the running, the athleticism, the agility, those are qualities. I almost hate it. I almost hate where football's going, where it's all about pressing and counterattacking and transition. But like, you'd probably choose an athletic midfielder over a technical midfielder these days, and I just don't. I think Henderson can kind of do that, whereas I don't know that Xhaka can. But so Tim, I want to talk Lacazette and the front three for a second. The first half was kind of a disappointment, I think it's fair to say, with respect to that performance. And there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, there's Aubameyang getting chalk on his boots for most of the first half. And as you know, by this point, I am broken record about Aubameyang, and almost no one wants to hear it, so I'm going to go into it again. I just think when you have a Golden Boot winner who has a goal in this game within 3 minutes of getting into the penalty area, have 0 shots for the first hour, and he's primarily the guy responsible with putting crosses into the box, that the system isn't necessarily maximizing the skill set of the players that you have on the pitch. And yet I'm sympathetic to the idea that getting all 3 of them on the pitch sort of means Aubameyang has to play one of those wide positions. I felt that the problem is that they never got close enough to each other. On the rare occasion where Lacazette and Aubameyang were near each other and the distances were good, they exchanged a few passes and Aubameyang almost got in on a 1-2 with Lacazette, and there were some nice little moves there, but they were often too far apart. We talk about Lacazette trying to play the Firmino role. Think about the Mohamed Salah penalty against us last week. The ball comes in from a wide space into Firmino, one beautiful cultured touch to Salah, but Salah's within 2 yards of him, running beyond? And we never really had those distances right. So how would you fix Pal? How would you fix Alp? How would you fix Lap? What was not working that you think is fixable so that Aubameyang isn't getting chalk on his boots and Lacazette can thrive a little more? Because I'm more in the Michael Cox camp that Lacazette struggled to distribute, but I think part of that is down to spacing.
I actually don't think he did. I think with Lacazette, I think he linked up really, really nicely. The problem was where the midfield wasn't functioning, and as Clive alluded to, we kind of gave up the entire centre of the pitch because we had Guendouzi and Torreira so wide, and I think we were kind of trying to mimic what Liverpool's midfield do, which is, those wide players in the midfield 3, they're the ones that go and sit in for the fullbacks. And it didn't really work for us. I actually think Aubameyang played well on the wing as well. I know there's kind of a resistance to the idea of him putting in crosses. He put in some really good ones, and he came very, very close to setting Pepe up with a brilliant cross to the back post.
Yeah, the Danny Rose block, the header rule out. Can I just make one quick point there, and then I'll let you get right back on your train of thought? I totally agree with what you're saying, but if Cristiano Ronaldo had a game where he played 8 brilliant crosses and had no shots, you'd probably say we need to use him. You see what I'm saying? It's not that he wasn't good at it. It's that I'm not sure you're maximizing his capabilities.
Yeah, maybe not. But Lacazette did score as well from centre forward, from a nice little assist from Pepe as well. I think that was quite an underrated assist actually. The very deft kind of way he played the ball, but I mean, obviously Lacazette does a hell of a lot of work to get it in the net. So
the second touch is amazing. Yep.
Yeah, and I didn't appreciate that until I saw it back. But he scored a goal as well, playing at centre forward, combining with Pepe. I think the answer is kind of twofold. I think first off, that midfield just didn't work. So all of Lacazette's link play was less about combining with Aubameyang and Pepe, and it was more about giving an outlet to the fact that our midfield was getting really pushed back and our defenders were really, really cut off. And Son was just picking up all this space and it kept stressing us and stretching us. And so I think the issue is that Lacazette, he was kind of doing the Firmino role, but inside his own half. And ideally you'd want him to be doing the bits and pieces he was doing perhaps 30, 40 yards further forward. So I think there's a bit of tinkering needs to go on with the midfield to get that right, and that might just take a few games. And the same with the front 3. I think it might just take a few games. I think that Pepe and Aubameyang will swap eventually, and you'll have Pepe coming inside and Aubameyang going outside. And one going right, one going left. I think you'll get Lacazette kind of moving into wide areas. I think once that understanding builds, it will be quite fluid. I think my concern is that, and I thought he would do this with his team lineup, that kind of playing that front 3 almost scared him into playing, a fairly conservative midfield 3. So, and I just kind of question that a little bit, that kind of almost doing what we were doing with Lacazette and Aubameyang anyway, and just cutting them off and making them an island separate from the rest of the team. And maybe having 3 of them cut off as an island separate from the rest of the team is better than 2. I still don't think it's ideal, and I hope that something that Emery learned from this game is that, and maybe it was just the opposition again, but I really hope when we come to, let's say he plays it against Watford, he plays that front 3 again, or Villa. I really hope the lesson learned here is that I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, that I think when you have got a front three like that, like maybe an Ozil or I think preferably a Ceballos, because he does more of the kind of the number 8 stuff, and I think he's a bit more kind of modern. But I said a few weeks ago, I don't think it's the end of the road for Ozil tactically. I do think there's a space for him, if only to kind of make those connections and have like an interchanging front four. Almost, and I think for most games we can do that, and we can lean into that, and I bet you'd see that Ozil's goal threat would go up in that kind of framework as well. So I think it just needs a little bit of work, a little bit of tinkering, but I'm not massively concerned about it. I'm still not convinced that it's like going to be perfectly balanced, but I just think there's enough quality there that. I think that's the kind of issue you pick up when your team's nearly perfect, a bit like when Arsenal bought Gilberto Silva and the team was basically complete, but they thought maybe just a little tweak here, and we buy one player and it's Gilberto, and that's it. It's completed the team, and I think we've got probably other things that we can look at before we come to that stage of asking questions about this front three.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things I pick out from this. I mean, we had 9 shots in the first half. We had 17 in the second. Now, admittedly, you're chasing the game, so game state matters there. But I also think, you know how you connect the midfield to the front three? You just push everybody further up the pitch. Like, I really think the only difference between the first half and the second half, the Ceballos substitution aside, is that we played 10 yards further up, and instead of a mid-block, we played a high press, and they couldn't play out. And you dropped the defenders a little deeper so that the long ball can't hurt you, and you pin them into their half. And we basically did what Liverpool did to us to them in the second half. Now, by the last 10 minutes, we looked knackered, and the game got really open, and we'll come to that. I want to do this. We'll take a break, and then I'm going to go to Clive. I'm going to read out a couple of quotes. We're going to analyze. That's what we're going to do. We're going to analyze the front three again, and then we're going to talk about the second half and what went right and some takeaways from the game. So here's what we'll do. We'll take a break. We'll tell you a little bit about The Athletic. So, if you want to listen to that, we appreciate it. And if not, I totally understand. You can just tap, and you're past it, or you can sign up for Patreon. You won't hear it because it's ad-free episodes there every time. So we'll take a break. We'll come back with more on the derby and maybe some positives. Why not? We can do that. Stay with us. Okay, it's time to tell you about The Athletic, the new home of football writing and a world-class sports website. You can get The Athletic for half off and a month trial right now if you go to theathletic.com/ArsenalVision. You'll help the pod, and of course you'll help The Athletic too, but that's a good thing because you will be at the new home of football getting world-class writing and the best coverage of Arsenal from writers like Amy Lawrence, whom we love, has been on the pod, David Ornstein, James McNicholas, also known as Gunnerblog, myself, but don't let that hold you back. The coverage of sports is unrivaled, and there's no advertising to get in the way, no clickbait. They're not chasing ad revenue. They're just trying to write great in-depth articles. They've broken some incredible news. They've had some incredible interviews. Loved the article about the Eddie Nketiah load to Leeds and how that came about. So there's a lot to like there. Try it out. It's a month free. And then if you stick with it, it's $2.50 a month. That's it. So you can go to theathletic.com/ArsenalVision and try it now. See what all the buzz is about. Go sign up now, theathletic.com/ArsenalVision. Okay, we're back, and I want to dive right back into it with Clive. Clive, I want to read you 2 quotes, okay? Do you mind? That wasn't a yes, but I'm going to do it anyway, okay? Emery cannot simply send out a trio of holding midfielders and expect his forward line to win him the game. The pace and clever movement of the front three can do little when the ball only reaches them in isolated positions far from goal. Okay? That does sound a little familiar, but those quotes aren't about Emery at Arsenal. They're actually from an article a few years ago about Emery at PSG and his struggles to get the most out of Di Maria, Cavani, and Lucas.
I knew it.
So, yes, because you've been in the Discord and because I sent it in WhatsApp. But, you're also very clever. But so my question to you is, for Emery, is this really the trick the whole season? The defense is only ever going to be as good as it's going to be. Is the trick for him to find the way, whether it's high pressing, bringing in a connector like Ozil, dropping one of the three, is the whole trick for him finding a way to get midfield to connect with the front three so you get more shots? Look, the 17 shots we had in the second half, that's Arsenal football. That's how we need to play. But we have been shot shy. We have struggled to create chances. So for you, is the whole story here getting the midfield and the attack to connect and to create chances?
There's lots of things going on here. I think Well, I think we've learned that we've got more work to do with the 4-3-3. Right, if we're going to go that way, and I'm not sure we're suited for that. I think we have to move more towards a double pivot, and I do think that's important. I think the team is set up for a 4-2-3-1 or a 3 at the back. I'm afraid you don't want to hear it. We've got to have Pepe closer to the goal. I don't like where he's doing all his best work with chalks on the back of his boots. I don't like that. He needs to do more inside. We have to think about making him far more fluid and be more fluid. I think we have to stop looking at Liverpool and start being ourselves. I think we have 3 very talented forwards and we have many talented midfielders. I absolutely get why Emery played the 3 in there. I actually picked it, and the reason why he did that is he knows that Spurs they're a running team, they're a strong team, so he picked the 3 players that he felt could protect our back 4 the best and allow our front 3 to do their stuff. But in the end, the position of those players was not clever. I don't think we knew where to stand. We weren't tight enough, we weren't compact enough. When we won the ball, we weren't connected, and we were just too spread out. We were just running after the wrong people. We didn't have we had defensive type players that like to be behind the ball, running all over the place, running ahead of the ball, not being positioned to build up. So, of course, it became a basketball match because there's no midfield. You just got to go back to front, and that's what we did. I do look at Spurs, and I think they do this very cleverly. They turn it into a track meet. They kick the ball long and they run after it on the counter. They know they can outrun us on the reverse, and they played for that very well. Son is by far their best player, and he showed that. And everyone takes off of him now. He's the one with the spark. He's the one with the movement. He can go inside, outside. He can shoot with both feet. He is a top class player, and we struggle to contain him all day long. And so the structure needs to be much more compact in midfield. Tactically, I said we were better versus Liverpool. I know we lost the game, but they're a very good side. But tactically, I thought we were much more disciplined, much better. In this game, I never felt it. I didn't feel as comfortable. I'm looking at players, looking at their execution and thinking, okay, but this is a different game. This is a derby, right? We are 2-0 down. And from that moment on, all bets are off. This is like, roll your sleeves up. We need to get something out of this. They cannot come into our house and take the points. And from that moment on, it becomes, what do you feel like doing? Let's go and get the game. Let's get after them. I mean, it's literally keystone top. Look at the Lacazette goal. We were just like 4 or 5 players swarming around the ball trying to get it back. They try to clear it. We get it. Guendouzi nicks in. We get it back into the area again. We keep it alive. That's Burnley football. That literally is Burnley football. Keep it in an area. We get the ball. Great 2 touches from Lacazette, goal. The talent is there. The tactical organisation needs to be tuned. It's not there. And I do think with this level of talent now, and Elliot, I'm going to sound a little bit like you.
Oh, good. I like that.
We do. Well, we got the talent now, so we have to help them. We have to give them a system which they can work from, and or at most 2. But we've seen 2 in the last 2 weeks. I'm not sure this can continue, and then we can expect the game state and the players to just arrive at the same time and produce their best performance. What we're finding is, for some periods, the game suits 1 or 2 players, but it didn't suit enough for me in this game. It didn't suit enough in the last game. We played players in the wrong position for me on the outside tips of the diamond. So we didn't quite commit. So we didn't quite commit to 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. We didn't quite commit to a diamond last week, in my opinion. We got some of our good players on the pitch, but we didn't quite commit to the system by having the right type of athletes in the right position. And we did it this time as well. So I understand why he did it. I really did. I felt it was a strange game. But what I did walk away with, in the 4-2 last year, it was our best performance of the season, maybe with Valencia away. And I'm not sure we ever hit the heights again of that performance. I felt this time that the trajectory has changed for the club. I feel there's a lot more to come in this team.
Could just for my benefit, could you identify like a couple tangible examples? Just because I've heard you say it, and I want to be with you. I mean, obviously, other than, and I don't mean that like physically, just I want to be where you are in headspace wise. Like, what are some of the things that make the trajectory look good to you, apart from just like we signed some good players this summer?
Okay, well, we've got a different players in the centre of the pitch now. So Guendouzi's 1 year older. He's looking like a player. We're all convinced. We went a bit large on him start of last season. He faded away. Second season, I don't think he's going to fade away. He just turned up at the France squad. That's not an easy squad to get into. So he is an up-and-coming superstar. Hopefully he signs a new contract and he's here for the next 4 or 5 years. Torreira needs to find a position at the base of the midfield, either as a single point of a diamond or part of a double pivot. Please don't have him out on the Kante side on the right. His potential, once he gets up to speed, is more significant. Pepe at the moment is all about assist, good combinations, finishing touches lacking. We can all see there's left foot shot there, there's power there. He needs to work on his fitness. Hopefully over this break he gets a chance to do that. The potential of that three is really there. David Luiz, funny enough, defensively, brings a level of, I don't want to say the worst composure, because it's one good thing, one bad thing. But what does concern me about David Luiz, and I need to see it with my own eyes, is I feel that we're defending a lot deeper with him. And I think that's creating connection issues, creating a big space. I think he almost plays for himself and he drops off so he can receive the ball in a lots of times where he can pass it. But actually, I want to see the lines closer together because I think we're a combination team and that combination is going. So David Luiz is one I'm looking at to see if our defensive line is not where it should be. I want to see us pressed up a lot more and trust our speed to get back, or trust our ability to read when the ball's got no pressure on it so we can drop off soon. But let's not start too deep because it becomes a trap meet and we don't do well at that. We haven't got the athletes to do that in centre midfield. But I do feel directionally we're going in the right direction. I do think the inclusion of the new couple of fullbacks is going to be a massive step forward.
Yeah, that's going to make a big difference. Yeah.
That may not see it till Christmas. And I do believe, we could be looking, while we're bedding in players, we could be looking at a 3 at the back system to accumulate and bed in players and get them up to fitness between now and the Christmas period. And I wouldn't be against that because what does it forces is our talent. Rather than being on the wing, they've got players outside them to do that job. And now we get Aubameyang and Pepe closer to the goal.
Yep.
So we have to decide what we want to be and what we're investing in. Are we investing in the 3-4s? If we are, let's get them narrower. Let's get them nearer the goal. Maybe let's give them fullbacks that really going to press on. In Liverpool's system, they have 3 quite workmanlike centre midfielders, but they really are aggressive with their fullbacks. We had 3 workmanlike midfielders, but Klasnic went, but I don't think Maitland-Niles did because Son pinned him back. So we didn't really get the width that we needed, the consistent ways to attack until we just said, sod the tactics book, let's just go for them. And that's what we did. But I still feel directionally we are much better, much more aggressive. There's some quick passing, quick movement, quick build-up. We just need to cancel out the stupid mistakes so we can actually see where the improvement is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all really well said. And I think I have to admit the one thing about the back 3, David Luiz is not distributing the way I thought he would. He's not taking the responsibility on the ball from the back. I think if you put him at the center of a back 3, he's going to be a lot more comfortable. I think when you play with wing backs, Maitland-Niles and Cole are obviously more suited to that. And then if you do play 3-4-3, naturally Aubameyang and Pepe just get closer to Lacazette because the wing backs are going to push up the wide spaces and you can take your wide forwards and slide them in a little bit closer to the box. So that all works. You're not talking about picking 2 in the middle. And if it's Xhaka and Guendouzi, no thank you. If it's Ceballos and Guendouzi or Torreira and Guendouzi, yeah, I can live with that. I do think where Guendouzi is concerned, he's kind of been a hipster choice. And I think getting called up to the French team, as silly as it sounds, I think it's going to make a big difference in the way he's perceived. I think it's great for his confidence and his development, but I no longer think he'll be a hipster choice, if that makes sense. Tim, actually, let me just ask you really quickly. I think last season, sometimes when you praise Guendouzi, you got written off as, oh, come on, he's not there yet. You're overstating it. In the stadium, in the derby, did you get the feeling that people were starting to realize what they had with Guendouzi? I mean, I know it's hard to speak for a stadium full of people, but do you think that the awareness and appreciation of the specialness of this 20-year-old player is starting to catch on with people? I mean, the assist he had is brilliant. He had a shot really well saved. He took responsibility in the derby at 20 years old.
Yeah, I think this was... For me, this isn't his first coming-of-age performance. I thought his first coming-of-age performance was away at Man City. It's just there were far fewer Arsenal fans at that game and we lost, which, doesn't... therefore, those things kind of get forgotten a little bit. I think I've seen him play like this a few times before. Maybe the final ball hasn't always quite been there, but this kind of forward-thinking, positive, always looking to get the ball forward into dangerous areas. I think that's the player we've been looking at for the last year. It might just be that this was the game where it came off more often than not, but I thought he was quite similar against Burnley. To be honest, he played the slightly deeper position that day, but I think this is largely what we usually see from him. Maybe the execution was just a bit better on this occasion, but yeah, I think so. I think nothing's going to endear you to Arsenal fans more than doing it in the North London derby. That sticks. Stuff sticks in people's memories, right? And we were talking about Xhaka earlier, and for any good that he's done, people are always going to point to that penalty against Brighton. And it's the same with Gervinho. Gervinho is kind of misremembered in my view as this like complete arse who was just always rubbish, and he wasn't.
No,
he was wildly inconsistent, but you know what? That means he was often quite good. But the gif of that miss against Bradford is just been replayed so many times that now everyone remembers this like completely hapless idiot who was always useless, and he wasn't. And so that can work in a player's favour as well. If you just do it in the right kind of game, people remember it. And I think this, and then immediately getting called into the French squad afterwards, a little bit maybe of the ill feeling towards Xhaka as well, all kind of coming at the same time. I think his stock is starting to rise, but to be honest, as brilliantly as I think he played, I think I've seen him play like this before, to be honest. So I was maybe slightly out of step with the stadium, because I just thought I thought, yeah, this is the player I think you are and that you can be. So I had no surprises really.
Yeah, well, it's just a phenomenal game, and I would actually refute the suggestion that he was not great in the first half. I thought he was the one person taking responsibility to try to connect the thirds, that he was stepping around pressure. He wasn't, a lot of times if we even feel a little press, the ball goes straight backwards. There was one where Son pressed him and he's like, no, I got this. Stepped around him, stepped into midfield, distributes up the wing and set us off on a really good attack. I just thought he was solid the whole game through. And there was one where he split three defenders to get it into Lacazette at the top of the box, and Lacazette got fouled, and we had a free kick that came to nothing. I think Pepe curled it just wide. But a lot of good nearly contributions, and then, of course, the one decisive one. And, Paul, I want to go through the two goals real quick. It's used as a stick to beat Emery, and I kind of understand why, to be fair, that we just kind of rely on Aubameyang and Lacazette to bail us out from basically not playing well or not having a system or not having a plan or whatever. But, when you have Aubameyang and Lacazette, maybe that's not such a bad thing. So they do it again. And I think we played better in the second half than just saying they bailed us out individually. But let's go through the goals just real quick. First, the Lacazette one. I can't decide if Pepe means to play that ball. I watched it the first time, like, that's a great pass. And the second time, I thought maybe it's like a weird scuff. I can't tell. Guendouzi's obviously involved in winning that back as well. And then Lacazette takes a first touch that I thought was kind of heavy, but in his stride pulls it down out of the air for the perfect roofed finish. That, to me, that's Lacazette more than he is Firmino. I mean, is it possible that we're trying to wish him into being Firmino because he's relatively strong on the ball and likes to drop deep sometime, but that really what he is a ferocious penalty box goal scorer?
Yeah, I think he's a false Firmino. I think he has a little bit of that. I'm going with that.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, because the thing about Firmino is, even if he did what Firmino does, can he do it at the rate Firmino does it? I mean, the guy's a fucking animal, right? You look at the stats for Firmino, he's just his busyness in a game. He's going to touch the ball twice as much as almost any other player in the Premier League trying to do the same thing. Lacazette is not that level of intensity, so you can get some of that out of him. We've all seen him drop deep. We've all seen cultured passes that he's got some vision. You kind of think, oh, this guy could almost play like a 10. But he's also lethal in really tight spaces. I mean, the the short back lift, the way he gets the shot off. We've seen him bury it into the top right corner from angles where it shouldn't go in. I think, didn't he do it against Lloris on that side? And now he's done it against Lloris on the other side. And the other thing I love about that goal, I think more than anything, is you just felt he knew that he channeled everything he had emotionally into this thing, and he knew what he was doing. Not just, I don't mean technically or the goal, just in terms of the importance of this game. This was all just fucking force of will, and got us right back into the game at a critical time, basically halftime, and kind of reset the emotional balance of this game. So it was absolutely huge.
Yeah.
It was superb. I think he did a lot of good things, but I think he struggled. He was going to struggle in this game in terms of connecting midfield. I don't think we can make too many judgments. I know there's a lot of data from previous games, but it's kind of all new. This is a new squad, same manager, new squad, new setup, new options, some familiar patterns we're seeing, but still, this isn't the game. I don't think Liverpool's the game, and I don't think this is the game you say, oh well, I kind of know how this one is going to end. But
well, all right, so that's Lacazette goal. With respect to the Aubameyang goal, I mean, I have to admit that, look, let's not pretend we don't all have our biases, and we don't all have confirmation bias, and we don't all lean into them. We all do it. I just like to do everything to the extreme. You know, I'm living that Red Bull lifestyle. So, you know, when he scores, my first thought is, oh, for fuck's sake, he's in the box 3 seconds and he's got a goal. It's right after Lacazette's taken off and Aubameyang goes through the middle. He makes that brilliant last shoulder run. The pass from Guendouzi, you can't say enough good things about it. But there's still, I mean, you're on the sprint running off the back shoulder into space. It's still not like a cakewalk from there, and Aubameyang puts it in. I mean,
I think Aubameyang's run makes the assist. I mean,
the run makes the pass. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think most strikers get that. I don't think it's because Aubameyang's quick.
That's his elite skill, his movement into space.
Yeah, and when the surge comes and how, and then, I mean, Aubameyang's studs are pretty good. I think his success rate with shots coming off the studs is astounding. And they're not always straightforward tap-ins. I mean, this can go. We've seen him miss from 6 inches out, right, and manage to get it over the bar. Strikers generally, this isn't a gimme, but he makes it a gimme, and it's like half a second, and you just go, wow.
Yeah, I mean, no shots in the first hour, 4 shots in the last 30 minutes, and I realize some of that is down to also the fact that we were more on top of them. I have to say, you guys, like and I know they're going through a bit of a thing, and I know that they were missing some key players. Every time I watch Spurs, I can't help but think this is a team that was in the CL final. This is a team that you know, is above us because they don't play football. When they're ahead, they foul. When they're behind, they dive. When they have the ball, they kick it long. They can't play through the thirds. They don't have
what we gave them in this game is what they're really good at.
Yeah, and that you have to ask questions about that. Now, to be fair, you know, when Lo Celso came on, that gave them a little more control. Lo Celso made a difference, and Ndombele would have as well. Let's just do this.
I do quickly want to say, I think Ceballos fundamentally changed how we played and fundamentally changed this game.
Yeah. All right. Well, so Clive, if you don't mind picking up on Paul's thread there, just real quick. First of all, are we all in agreement that the Kane dive is a dive?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
You know what? It's shocking.
Jonathan Liu called it a brake test.
Yeah.
In Formula One, you know, you brake test the guy in front of you. I thought that's brilliant. He steps in front, stops, and then says to Sokratis, "Can you stop?" He's not even trying to go for the ball, and thank goodness the referees are onto this trick now, where he puts himself, he initiates a contact, and it's becoming embarrassing. People say he's trying to take advantage of the situation, where if he was anybody else, he would be called a diver.
Yeah, but he's England's Harry Kane, and I have to say, I understand if you're a talentless prick like Dele Alli who's not good at football, that you throw yourself to the ground because it's the only thing you're good at. But if you are Harry Kane and you've won a Golden Boot and you're supposed to be one of the best strikers in the world, back yourself to do something. I just hate that that's his first instinct, and it's coached right through their team. Paul?
And he'd already got the penalty he was entitled to in an NLD.
Yeah,
So
he'd already scored a penalty. And to be fair, he'd just been caught doing it the week before, for fuck's sake. But, Clive, let's talk Ceballos. I think he made a difference. I think it helped us play further up the pitch. I think it quickened the tempo. That is what he likes to do. I'm still sort of weirded out by the fact that he does give the ball away a little more than I was expecting. I think he's got to adjust to the speed of the Premier League. I think also for me, look, I think Tim would agree with me too because he doesn't like this. His one-footedness is a problem for me. I don't like it. I think he's got to use his left. Like, he doesn't have to use his left 50% of the time. 5% of the time to make a pass would be fine. But he did change this game for the better. I think he gave Guendouzi more freedom as well. How did you feel he affected the game? And are you surprised that Captain Halftime Subs has suddenly become a lot more conservative about using his substitutions? Waited quite a while to do it this game, left one in his pocket, but Ceballos certainly an important one.
Yeah, I think once Guendouzi went into a double pivot, I thought the game changed, and I thought Ceballos, he just did a couple of little step overs in the middle, just a couple of turns. And Sissoko went, okay, mate, you can have it. I'm not going to go near you because you're going to embarrass me. Winks always steps off as well. So it did become basically to a midfield-less game. And so he could sit in front of their back eight and just stroke the ball around, try to create angles. So it sort of suited him, as it would have done Ozil. And the Liverpool game did not suit him. He was run over by Henderson. And so I like his talent. I like his personality. When he came on and took the shot and tried to lift the crowd, I like that. You have to look at this game in a different way to most other games, Elliot. You really do. The fear of losing a derby in a stadium is just awful. You just feel sick. You just feel sick. And players were doing everything to show the fans that actually we're not going to lose this game. And so they were doing everything in their power. I did like his performance in this game. I like what he does to other teams. I like how they step away. But there was still a hell of a lot of space in our midfield. So he didn't fix that problem. And we've got to work this out. I think there's a player missing in there still, and we have to decide how much we want to commit to protection versus what we're going to do on the ball. I feel that Arsenal fans always talk about where we are defensively, and they pick on people who don't do that job without really saying, are we committed enough to defence? Have we got the right type of players? Are we prepared to take something away from our going forward by having a real defensive player there that's not a playmaker, somebody that really walks on the pitch and says, I'm going to stop you, and I'm going to stop you here before you get anywhere near my defence. And other teams have that player, a player that's focused on that protection role and not focused on anything else. And we asked that player to also be our best long passer and do a lot of protection, which I don't think he's suited for. So we either suited for a double pivot, or we change how we commit in centre midfield to allow players like Ceballos to not to do too much on the retreat. And we have to work that out soon. So there's a player missing, and there's an upgrade coming for me next season. And there needs to be a player like that Ibrahim Sangare, that type of player that can come in and really perform a physical role that allows us to match those teams that are trying to overrun us. And again, what it does is it allows players, the playmaking players, to do just that. And I think that's what we need to move to going forward. I like, Elliot, I think, again, I've said it already. I just feel we're on the edge of something. And I feel this game was almost, in some ways, I'm almost glad we didn't win it. What would it have done to us? Would it make us think that we've already reached a promised land? I think
you've derailed here, Clive. You're almost glad we didn't win it. It's not an analysis that fits with your usual level.
I think when I say that, I'm conscious of the fact that we can become over euphoric when we win and too critical when we lose. And I think if we'd have won this game, of course I would have loved it. But I also think this game did not solve problems. That's what I'm trying to say. It did not.
I like you saying it better that way, personally.
Yeah, it did not. It did not solve problems. We've got as many problems still to resolve, and I hope that the coach can learn from this game and get us into a shape that brings out the best in more of our players.
Yeah, no, that is well said, and I take your point. I agree with you in that respect, in that we got by in this game a lot more on just desire and individual pieces of skill than we did on tactical fluency and coordination. So I'm with you on that. One thing that I didn't mention, I'm going to roll it back just for a second, and then Tim, you and I can pick the bones out of the rest of this. I didn't mention Sokratis enough. It came up a little when Tim mentioned Adrian Clark's breakdown, but Xhaka gets a lot of focus in this game for what he did, which was incredibly stupid and a terrible, terrible way to give away a second goal in a derby and could have lost it for us. But I think what Sokratis does for the first goal is in the category. He's in no man's land. He's running way up the pitch. He jumps with Xhaka, but it's not even a real jump. He doesn't go and take everybody out of the play like a center back saying, screw you, midfielder, I'm killing everybody here. He half-heartedly jumps, then looks over his shoulder and watches everyone run away from him. He has plenty of pace to recover. He doesn't use it. I think that is the original sin that cost us that goal. And I think last season, because Mustafi was so bad, Sokratis escaped focus because he had a few good games and we were like, he's a new guy, so we weren't sure what we had, and he was a little faster than we expected. And we're like, okay, he was pretty good. I think this season we might be in for a bit of a wake-up call with how not good he maybe is, and that's something to keep an eye on. But Tim, speaking of not good, let's talk Mkhitaryan. I thought it was interesting that he was picked to come on, and admittedly on this pod, I've said I think he's useful. You sort of saw what is useful about him. Mkhitaryan maybe got into more high-quality, dangerous positions in this short period of time he was on the pitch than every other player combined. And yet he might as well have been made of cement the way the ball was bouncing off of him. He could not trap a ball within a yard of his body. He could not do a thing right. So here he is standing in acres of space, in the channel, on the wing, in the box, and couldn't do a thing right. I wonder what you think of his performance and whether you are at all sort of curious about the decision to select him at all for coming on in light of the fact that he has been moved out of the club today.
Yeah, that's a weird one, isn't it? Because obviously at the time we didn't know, didn't know anything about that at all.
Yeah,
so
but they must have,
didn't
right?
really. Yeah. You've got to think at least contact had been made at that point, and Reece Nelson's there on the bench as well, and we've obviously decided that Reece Nelson, we've got enough faith in Reece Nelson to get rid of Mkhitaryan in the first place. So,
so use him.
Can we trust him for 23 minutes of a North London derby? I don't know. It's always difficult to speculate on the psychological kind of side of it because we just don't know. And to be frank, we've seen this from Mkhitaryan before, so it's not completely out of character. I do wonder if the fact that he came on the left, I don't know why, but he just never ever looks as comfortable on the left to me, and you'd think that he should do because of cutting in on his right foot and all of that. And isn't that where he played for Dortmund? Well, I don't really know, to be honest, but I always had in my head that's where he played for Dortmund when he had that.
I think he was sort of their 10, wasn't he? Kind of a Kevin De Bruyne mode, box to box 10 kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe. But I think on paper he should be a good inside forward for the left-hand side, but so. He seems to be much more comfortable on the right. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how advanced the deal was at that stage, but I'm pretty sure by the end of the game it was like, yeah, get Roma on the phone, let's get this done. The thing is with Mkhitaryan, right, is I think he's a really talented player. I think there's real talent there. I think there's some really interesting attributes, but he just doesn't put it together enough.
Doesn't execute. Yeah.
No. And then there are some games when he does, and you think, yes, there's the player, and then he just kind of slips away again. So I tweeted about this today. He actually reminds me of like a precocious teenager anyway, in that you can see ability, but he doesn't put it all together.
A great point. Yep.
Yeah, so I'd rather an actual precocious teenager, like I'm not sure Reece Nelson is a teenager anymore, but near enough, or Martinelli. Like if we're going to have like a raw, inconsistent but quite talented wide player, why not just give those minutes to Martinelli and Reece Nelson, and there's at least the hope that they can become something better. And I'm pretty sure that put together their wages aren't even half of what Mkhitaryan's are on his own. So Yeah, it's not really worked out, has it? I mean, he's not been an absolute disaster, but it's not really worked out. And despite the fact we used him quite a bit last season, I think you could see towards the end when Emery really kind of settled on having that front two and using wing backs. That's also because he just didn't believe that Mkhitaryan could put it together enough. And Mkhitaryan's had every chance, because there was a time where I thought he was one of the few players we had who was actually suited to what Emery wants to do, with those kind of wide forwards coming inside and playing almost as tens. That's Mkhitaryan. That's what he does. That's what he is. And he's one of the few players we had who was like a ready-made Emery player, and he still couldn't do it. Couldn't do it consistently enough. So, but I think probably, to be honest, the salary is the big thing here. It's just getting rid of that and and going again. And to be honest, as much as and I'd criticised Emery maybe for not using young players quite enough, I feel like Emery actually is the type of manager who'd quite like young players, and I think we're maybe seeing that a bit more this season, because if he wants to be, chameleon, tactically flexible and everything like that, actually it can be easier to do that with young players. It can be easier to mould them. Ferguson did it with quite a few players, had them play like multiple positions. Louis van Gaal said that he loved working with academy players because basically they do what you tell them to do. They're like an unshaped lump of clay. I think maybe Emery will look. We all know what his first choice front three is going to be, but I think guys like Saka, Martinelli, and Nelson will get some minutes now.
Yeah, and I mean, whether it's Emery choosing to do that or maybe there's a hand on his shoulder, kind of strongly suggesting it. That's more conspiracy theory stuff, but we'll see what it is. I will say that, Paul, we just have a couple moments here to wrap up, but the game kind of got drunk in the last 10 minutes. I think we were knackered from the energy we expended trying to get back into it, and it got really open. And if we're being totally honest, we're maybe lucky we didn't lose it with the last kick of the game. There were a couple moments there where they had like 5-on-3, 4-on-1. I mean, it was just a up and down, totally open, drunk game for about 8-10 minutes at the end there. I think we were totally knackered. Do you worry a little bit about that, or is that just Derby stuff for you, that the game just turned into a street fight? I mean, literally there was fighting towards the end, and that the players were knackered, and Derby's sometimes finish this way because everybody wants to win, and everybody's maybe put out too much energy in the first 80 minutes?
Yeah, I think it was just a cluster at the end, and I think. But the problem is, what do you do as managers if you withdraw your team? If you're Emery and you start playing a little bit more cautious, you've been so leaning so far the other way, you're probably not going to do it right. So you just kind of got to go with the flow. I got to give Harry Kane some props. Do we ever do that?
No, please
don't. That was an astounding strike off the post, and we should remember that. But we had plenty of our own good situations where we could have polished it off. But yeah, the last 10 minutes, they were we had the dominant position, but they probably had the two or so best chances. Fortunately, it fell to Sissoko. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think that was our brilliance, making sure he was the guy unmarked. I don't know what. I think it was Eriksson who passed it to him, and you'd think he'd know better. You'd think he'd just say, "No, hang on a second, I'll stand on the ball and find anybody else."
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all I was going to say is I just think, we've been complaining for a while about we want to create more chances. Yes, the game was drunk at the end, and no, we don't want it to be that open and lack that much control. But 17 shots in the second half, give me that all day long, and I'll watch that football. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and it really ramped up with Ceballos, who again got off another great shot, which is, he doesn't have a huge goals and assists history, but he could really come into his own. Yeah. And I think if we manage to get him into our three in midfield, whatever that's called, we're going to have a fun season. Yeah. No matter what the structure. And it was a fun set. It was a bloody great game.
I don't think it was a well played game, but yes, no. I agree with that. It was entertaining. At least the second half was better. Look, the only thing I'll add is I don't think the fullbacks were very good. I think Kolasinac did a lot of Kolasinac stuff, which is sometimes he's bombing down the wing, but he's not doing much with it. And I thought Maitland-Niles played really within himself in this game for the most part. I do start to think that when Bellerin and Tierney are back, Pepe and Aubameyang in a formation like this will look a lot more devastating. I think better fullback play will unleash the front three a little more too. I think we're a little hamstrung by that situation. We got to go. I do want to tell you, it is international break. If you have ever wanted to try our Patreon, and again, if you don't, no worries. We love you. We're super appreciative to have you here listening to this, and we will put more of these free pods out, of course. But we're going to do the deluge, the avalanche of stuff over on Patreon during the international break to help everybody get through it. So while we will definitely have another free pod out, no worries, we're going to have a lot of new concepts that we're trying out on Patreon in the next 2 weeks. So if you thought, you know what, I'll give them a try, this might be the time to do it. And if not, no worries. We appreciate you anyway. Paul's on Twitter, Pause in My Pants. Thanks, Pause.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter, ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Tim's on Twitter, Stillberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter. Yankee Gunner. Who do we play next? Sheffield?
Watford.
I knew that. Yeah. Give us a 5-star review right now. Things about Scott. He'll be back eventually too. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Watford 0.